does not even pretend that his compulsory labour is a free bargain. If Trotsky and the trust magnate come to a working compromise, that compromise will be a servile state. But it will also be the supreme and by far the most constructive and conclusive result of the industrial movement in history, of the power of machinery or money, of the huge populations of the modern cities, of scientific inventions and resources, of all the things before which the agricultural society of the Southern Confederacy went down. But even those who cannot see that commercialism may end in the triumph of slavery can see that the Northern victory has to a great extent ended in the triumph of commercialism. And the point at the moment is that this did definitely mean, even at the time, the triumph of one American type over another American type, just as much as any European war might mean the triumph of one European type over another. A victory of England over France would be a victory of merchants over peasants, and the victory of Northerners over Southerners was a victory of merchants over squires, so that the very unity which Mr. Wells contrasts so favourably with war was not only itself due to a war, but to a war which had one of the most questionable and even perilous of the results of war. That result was a change in the balance of power, the predominance of a particular partner, the exaltation of a particular example, the eclipse of excellent traditions when the defeated lost their international influence. In short, it made exactly the same sort of difference of which we speak when we say that 1870 was a disaster to Europe, or that it was necessary to fight Prussia lest she should Prussianize the whole world. America would have been very different if the leadership had remained with Virginia. The world would have been very different if America had been very different. It is quite reasonable to rejoice that the issue went as it did. Indeed, as I have explained elsewhere, for other reasons, I do on the whole rejoice in it. But it is certainly not self-evident that it is a matter for rejoicing. One type of American state conquered and subjugated another type of American state, and the virtues and values of the latter were very largely lost to the world. So if Mr. Wells insists on the parallel of a United States of Europe, he must accept the parallel of a civil war of Europe. He must suppose that the peasant countries crush the industrial countries, or vice versa, and that one or the other of them becomes the European tradition, to the neglect of the other. The situation which seems to satisfy him so completely in America is, after all, the situation which would result in Europe if the Germanic empires, let us say, had entirely arrested the special development of the Slavs, or if the influence of France had really broken off short under a blow from Britain. The Old South had qualities of humane civilization which have not sufficiently survived, or at any rate have not sufficiently spread. It is true that the decline of the agricultural South has been considerably balanced by the growth of the agricultural West. It is true, as I have occasion to emphasize in another place, that the West does give the new America something that is nearly a normal peasantry, as a pendant to the industrial towns. But this is not an answer. It is rather an augmentation of the argument. In so far as America is saved, it is saved by being patchy, and would be ruined if the Western patch had the same fate as the Southern patch. When all is said, therefore, the advantages of American unification are not so certain that we can apply them to a world unification. The doubt could be expressed in a great many ways, and by a great many examples. For that matter, it is already being felt that the supremacy of the Middle West in politics is inflicting upon other localities exactly the sort of local injustice that turns provinces into nations struggling to be free. It has already inflicted what amounts to religious persecution, or the imposition of an alien morality, on the wine-growing civilization of California. In a word, the American system is a good one, as governments go, but it is too large, and the world will not be improved by making it larger. And for this reason alone I should reject this second method of uniting England and America, which is not only Americanising England, but Americanising everything else. But the essential reason is that a type of culture came out on top in America and England in the 19th century, which cannot and would not be tolerated on top of the world. To unite all the systems at the top without improving and simplifying their social organisation below would be to tie all the tops of the trees together where they rise above a dense and poisonous jungle, and make the jungle darker than before. To create such a cosmopolitan political platform would be to build a roof above our own heads, to shut out the sunlight on which only usurers and conspirators, clad in gold, could walk about in the sun. This is no moment when industrial intellectualism can inflict such an artificial oppression upon the world. Industrialism itself is coming to see dark days, and its future is very doubtful. It is split from end to end with strikes and struggles for economic life, in which the poor not only plead that they are starving, but even the rich can only plead that they are bankrupt. The peasantries are growing not only more prosperous, but more politically effective. The Russian Moujik has held up the Bolshevist government of Moscow and Petersburg. A huge concession has been made by England to Ireland. The League of Nations has decided for Poland against Prussia. It is not certain that industrialism will not wither, even in its own field. It is certain that its intellectual ideas will not be allowed to cover every field, and this sort of cosmopolitan culture is one of its ideas. Industrialism itself may perish, or, on the other hand, industrialism itself may survive, by some searching and scientific reform that will really guarantee economic security to all. It may really purge itself of the accidental maladies of anarchy and famine, and continue as a machine, but at least as a comparatively clean and humanely shielded machine. At any rate, no longer as a man-eating machine. Capitalism may clear itself of its worst corruptions by such reform as is open to it, by creating humane and healthy conditions for labour, and setting the labouring class to work under a lucid and recognised law. It may make Pittsburgh one vast model factory for all who will model themselves upon factories, and may give to all men and women in its employment a clear social status in which they can be contented and secure. And on the day when that social security is established for the masses, when the industrial capitalism has achieved this larger and more logical organisation, and found peace at last, a strange and shadowy and ironic triumph, like an abstract apology, will surely hover over all those graves in the wilderness, where lay the bones of so many gallant gentlemen, men who had also from their youth known and upheld such a social stratification, who had the courage to call a spade, and a slave, a slave. The end of section 28, chapter 15.